everyone. I'm here with Dr. Rick Wilson, and he is a licensed professional counselor and licensed marriage and family counselor. And we are here today to talk a little bit about marriage counseling, how it's been this year with the pandemic, and just important things that we want you guys to know. So thanks for being here, Rick.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. Our country's been through a pretty difficult year with COVID-19. Do you think that has had an impact or has hurt families and marriages during this time?
Yeah, I think obviously what has happened is families and kids and all the marriages are all stuck in one room for 24/7. And so when you're in that one place and they're stuck together and they don't have outlets that they would normally have, work, they're working from home mostly, they're not getting out to be with friends or eating out and things. So that being stuck there together has sort of highlighted some of the brokennesses and some of the weaknesses that these relationships and these families had, which they probably always had, but they didn't really get focused on as much because they had outlets. And now that they're stuck together, they start to see that, yes, there were some things that we weren't paying attention to, and now we can't miss them. And so it has started to be a little bit of a problem. There are a number of couples that are asking, that are coming, and I see the severity of what's going on with them. They didn't, it has increased because what's happened is they're having these dialogues that are not pleasant anymore, and they've got a lot of areas of dysfunction or intimacy issues and all that have been there, and now they can't miss them, and so they become sort of a problem. So, that's been part of what I've been seeing with families. Obviously, the children are home full time. Some of them are back in school, but I'm aware of a lot of the schools, even though they've opened the doors, they're still staying at home. So, and parents some of them have actually had to, quit jobs to stay home and some of these things to be with their children. So there's all these stresses that have caused a lot of dysfunction or difficulty in the family and have shown up in the marriages. The severity of issues just overall. I talk to counselors around town. I have pastors I deal with, and everybody agrees that the severity is just increased, that people are feeling a lot more of it than they used to. And because we're putting all this focus on the intimacy side of being together all the time, that showed up a lot more. I guess for me, it's sort of, there's sort of this idea that it's meant that as a counselor, I got to try and sort of be relying on God a little bit more, and having Him help me to help these couples see that we can get through this together, and also for personal stamina and asking for guidance every day in what I'm doing. Yeah. Because that's obviously they're coming here to talk to us and giving us their lives to kind of help work on these things. And so sometimes it takes a while to be able to see what's going on behind the scenes because they're walking in bad places.
As you're seeing this influx of families and relationships, they're taking on new roles at home. That's creating new stress. Is that creating different roles or hats that you have to put on as a counselor?
Well, certainly there are many hats that a counselor puts on anyway. So I think some of the hats that are more pronounced lately would be some of the things like becoming sort of an encourager, helping them see that, it's going to be okay. We're going to work through this, and helping them believe in some of those things. Another one would be sometimes is just offering them my hope. I want them eventually, they have to own that themselves and take that and grow that. But sometimes they don't have much hope because of all that's going on and some of some tragic things, if you have losses of family members and all kinds of things. And so I kind of let them, if you will, borrow my hope for a little while. And it is a gift. And so then that allows them to then feel a little bit more safe. And so they can put on some of the work they need. So they get it until they sort of, like I said, they can start to believe in their hard work and they can learn, that healing relationships can happen, and it will happen. I think another area is sometimes you become a teacher. They come from places in their life they don't have tools, they didn't know things, and so you're sort of helping them learn. You're teaching them some things that they haven't, they don't have in their toolbox, you might say.
Yeah.
And so part of that teaching is getting that relationship so they feel safe with you. Being that I have this gray hair, they believe me whether I'm telling the truth or not. But no, I am always telling the truth. But so, helping them feel safe to be able to learn and want to see that there's a positive hope that they can do those things. Learning, like I said, some tools or learning that brokenness can be. When I say tools, what I mean is I'm giving them some new things to work from. Mm-hmm. Who they are as people, that's been established. Mm-hmm. And those old wounds and all, they don't go away. But what we do is we try to give them some new tools so they can either go back to the old stuff that's not working so well, mm-hmm. or they can decide to use some of these new tools, and that can be more effective and more helpful. So there's a lot of different layers we're talking about here, mm-hmm. That we're trying to work on. Another one is that we really kind of become a coach or a mentor. Sometimes I'm listening to them talk and I'm watching their communication and I'm seeing them say things that aren't appropriate or things that they could say better. And so I may kind of rehearse some of that with them, mm-hmm. and let them see. If you tried saying it this way, you would be understood differently, because they don't necessarily have those abilities because they just never learned them.
Right.
So you become a coach and modeling things with what's going on. And then, if the couple desires, we can also give them some biblical models that, the Bible has a lot of wonderful, practical things that they can learn from and they can understand. And so if they ask to learn those things, then I certainly am open to share some areas that I can teach them some of what that might look like.
Can you give us some examples of those?
Sure. I think one of the major ones that is at the core is what I call this idea of oneness in marriage. And of course, this comes from a verse in the Bible way back at the very beginning in Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. Mm-hmm. I think most people that have been to any kind of weddings that are done in a church and have a pastor speaking, they've heard this verse before. And the verse is simply this: a man will leave his mother and his father, and he will join or cleave to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. Mm-hmm. And that's a beautiful image, but most people have no idea what that means. Mm-hmm. Because there's a lot of beautiful things and some power that comes out of that. And so the scripture teaches us as in oneness, we come in together, a husband and wife, they are becoming this one thing. Now there's a good side of oneness and there's a negative side of oneness, because we are humans. Mm-hmm. And so, we have what you might say sin is a piece of the puzzle here, mm-hmm. as we know. So I usually will try and share with them what does that negative side look like. Mm-hmm. And then we end with the positive, because oneness is two people coming together and becoming one means anything and everything that affects one of them affects, of course, the other, mm-hmm. because they're one. Then if we were to treat someone negatively or treat our spouse negatively, because we're one, in a sense, we're treating ourselves poorly. Mm-hmm. Now, no one thinks of it. I've been married 35 years. I don't think when I'm saying things to my wife that aren't always appropriate, what am I doing to myself? So I have to help them see that there is something going on there. Mm-hmm. And of course, the positive side of oneness is when I love them and I do good things for them, in a sense, because we're one, I'm also receiving some of the gift of that. Mm-hmm. And so, when they see that, and some eyes are opened up and they're like, wow, okay. And so these are practical, that's just one of the very many practicals. So that's a good example of what that idea of oneness looks like. Mm-hmm.
Would you say that any of the areas that you cover are more common than others, that it takes a common path when you're doing marriage counseling?
Sure. I think that certainly there's the whole idea of the many of the couples have commonalities overarching because we're all human beings. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, there are areas that I see. One of the first ones, and probably the most important one, and I spend as much time as I need to on, is this idea of communication. Mm-hmm. Because here's the problem with communication. If we're doing it wrong, number one, we're tearing down and creating an unsafe atmosphere in our marriage. Mm-hmm. But secondly, if I don't learn to communicate well, how do I solve anything?
Yeah.
So I need folks to be able to see how to have this positive communication and learning how to do a good job, because most things can be solved if we can do a decent job of communicating with each other. But unfortunately, we have the negative communication that usually dominates. And when people walk into my office, they're pretty good at it, unfortunately. And so, I usually will start with looking at what is these negative models, what do they look like? And I have some sheets and stuff to help them see that, so that they can sort of realize, and it hits their head, oops, that's what that was. And that's what this message I'm sending, and so I don't want to do that. And then we will flip to looking at what does positive communication look like. And it's a simple phrase. It's called good listening skills.
Harder than you think.
Because where in life do people listen to you anymore? We're talked at all day, and we don't do a lot of good listening, and we don't feel heard. And so when you're in a relationship and your spouse doesn't seem like they're listening to you, and they're not hearing, and they're replying to things that aren't even what you said, it becomes a problem. So we teach them how to do a better job of listening, so they can really let their spouse feel valued and loved, because I know you care enough that you want to really understand where I'm coming from. And when they give that feeling of being heard and listened to, it creates a really beautiful place. So getting that communication set first. There's certainly other ones. Along with that, we would look at conflict resolution, because most people have conflict, and most people that are coming in have had enough conflict. So we give them some models of how to walk through that. And certainly there's a piece of that looks at forgiveness, because a lot of negative things have been said and a lot of pain has been laid down. And so there's forgiveness, and we help them share and understand how they do that okay. So there's that piece. Obviously, one of the other big ones people will talk about is the financial piece. And in this time right now, many people have been laid off, or they're in question in their mind. What is the future going to look like? And so there's a lot of financial pressures. And so if people haven't been able to learn how to manage money well, I happen to have the advantage, and I'm not a financial planner by any stretch, but I actually have a master's degree in business also. So I'm allowed to, it allows me to be able to have a more in-depth conversation about some of these things. And I want them to understand there's a meaning behind money for them. Is it about savings? Is it about spending? Is it about fun? What is the meaning of money? So that when they go to try and build a budget, and budgeting is very important, because it gives them, a budget lets them not have to fight with each other. The budget answers the question, so can I spend this or not? But they need to have built into that budget who they are, the meaning of money, so that if I'm really all about saving, that better be a part of my budget. If I need to have my hair cut once a month, I need to make sure that's in my budget, because that's an important thing. So helping them understand those things. That kind of looks at most of it. There's a last final one that most people are like, we know it's coming. And I call it intimacy. Now, intimacy, that word automatically makes people think sex, okay? And sex is not a bad thing, it's a beautiful thing, but it's not what intimacy is all about. That's one of the byproducts of a beautiful, intimate life. And so I help them understand what intimacy looks like. I help a couples feel safe and accepted, because when you're in those close quarters, you're connected, and when you're one, that intimacy is there. And so I help them grasp that. Intimacy can exist without marriage. However, it's impossible for a meaningful marriage to exist without intimacy. And so I have couples that they don't feel like they've been connected that way, and they live in as roommates. I've heard this phrase too many times. Live as a roommate? This is your spouse. Not a good thing, because they haven't understood intimacy. They haven't learned the beauty of that. And so I have some sheets that look at 6 different areas that we can grow in intimacy, and just one of them is going to be in the sexual area. A bunch of them are emotional, and there's this final piece which is really important, I think, which is the spiritual intimacy. And do they connect in that place? Are they spending some time together? Many times they may have their own relationship with the Lord, but they don't have one as a couple. And most actually don't. And it's a sad thing, so we help them understand that piece, because that's a strong connection place. And, certainly there's a belief that if you got God in the middle of it, you also have a helper in the middle of this thing. And so we help them understand that piece. So that's kind of the main things. Now, some folks have kids. So one final piece that shows up, especially right now, is all these kids are home and they're having some struggles. And so their parenting skills, if they're good, great. But if they're not great parenting skills, they are accentuated once again by the fact that we're all in this close quarters and we have all this extra stress, and my kids they can't see their friends half the time now, and we're not going out. And so we talk about parenting skills and help them feel at ease and that they can learn these things better, and we can solve some problems. So I know that I spoke a lot of things going on, but that's true. There's a lot that these folks are having issues with. Now, we don't do that in one sitting, don't worry. But over time, if you build that relationship to let them feel safe, you can work through a lot of these.
Well, you definitely helped me see how complex and also how much you do and what the role is of the therapist in that relationship and in the counseling and in the family unit. It sounds like there's tools that go into it, there's investigation that goes into it, there's problem solving that goes into it, and overall strengthening.
There's good listening that goes into it. I can't do any of those things until I spend the time to truly understand where they're coming from and hear their stories and their backgrounds. And I didn't highlight that, but that's an important aspect of it.
Absolutely.
Because if I can understand where their models are, then I can help them build new ones or understand why they even do the things they do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Rick. I hope we will all do a little bit better of listening to our partners.